Welcome, everyone, to the RPG Goblin. I am your host, Willow, and I am the one who asks all the questions. We talk about all kinds of games on here, and also what I'm going to start calling TTRPG topic episodes, which is basically where we just talk about a cool thing in TTRPGs. We've done like adding horror to TTRPGs, and we've done several with Zakariah, and those have been great. And we're going to be doing another one today, all about power gaming within TTRPGs, which I'm very, very interested about because Zakariah is like, I've had this on my mind. I just need to basically let it all out into the void. So we are the void today. Uh, but before we get, too much into the topic, Zakariah, you are our guest today. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone where they can find you and other cool things that you want to say about yourself? And yeah.
Yeah, hey, I am Zakariah. I am a forever dungeon master. I make a lot of content for D&D that of course that I use in my home games, but um also more than I can use in any home game, so I end up publishing it on DMsGuild. And so if you look up my name on DMsGuild, Zakariah, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff that I've made, and it's all free. So if you end up seeing any of it, feeling inspired by any of it, stealing any bit of it, I love to hear about that. So feel free to reach out because it makes me very happy to hear that other people have found the things that I've pulled out of the ether entertaining for their group. So
Absolutely, which I think is fantastic. And he does have some really, really great content in his GM's Guild. And I also will have a link to it in the description below for you guys to go and check out. But yeah, I do want to preface this episode a little bit with because we're going to be talking about power gaming, which is a, pretty big topic in TTRPGs. And I want to say that, like, however you want to play your games is okay as long as everyone at the table is okay with it. You're being safe and respectful towards people. This is just a space to kind of get out our irks or ideas and stuff like that on different topics. But if you like to power game and min max and stuff like that, and as long as everyone at your table is okay with it, that is okay. But yeah, I just wanted to kind
yeah,
of preface.
every that is so fair. It's like every play style is valid if
Mhm.
everybody at your table is having fun.
Exactly.
Whenever
There's
you're
no
talking,
right way.
yeah, whenever you're talking about like disruptive behaviors, that is always a bit of context for it, right? Like,
Mhm.
is it disruptive if nobody at your table cares? No, it isn't. It isn't a problem.
Exactly. And so there's no right way to play these games. The only right way is for everyone to have fun and all be on the same page. So, with that out of the way, I want to start getting into the topic of today's episode, which
Mhm.
is power gaming. And Zachariah, if you would like to start off and just explain what power gaming is to everyone that is listening, just in case they don't know, or just as a refresher.
Yeah, it is important to define your terms for this
Mhm.
because I have seen like plenty of discourse about power gaming, and there seems to be a lot of very disparate ideas of what that constitutes online. And when one person is talking about their idea of power gaming and somebody else is talking about their idea of power gaming, and those don't line up, you end up with discourse that gets absolutely nowhere,
True.
and sort of, it can leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth by the end of it because we were arguing about different things. So what?
That just feels like
Yeah,
the slogan of Twitter.
honestly, yeah, like the internet as, in general, any open forum, it's like the first stage of like an actual like philosophical discussion is defining your terms, which can
Mhm.
take forever, to be fair. Like you may never get to the subject at hand because you spend so much time defining your terms. But it's important because like if you're using the same words but they mean different things to each of you, then you end up with this sort of like weird what is it, like equivocation happening where
Mhm.
somebody is trying to equate one thing to mean something else that they didn't intend, or they're trying to put words in the other person's mouth.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so what I'll be using as what I'm defining power gaming as is a style of gaming that focuses on maximizing progress towards a specific goal. more specifically, using in-game mechanics, external information, or role play concepts to favor your own character or story and give them an unfair or unrealistic advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not talking about knowing how to play the game. Because what you may have noticed there in my definition of power gaming is it kind of has overlap with metagaming,
Mm-hmm.
which would be using a strategy, information, or action that your in-game character shouldn't be capable of or aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I think a good way to like distinguish that is like a metagamer will just attack your troll with fire because they know that's their weakness. And a power gamer might justify it by having your wizard make a skill check first.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like it's not necessarily what the power gamer does there isn't necessarily a bad thing, and depending upon your rule set of your given game, it might even be the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So power gaming does have some like overlap with metagaming, but power gaming is less specific, and you have more I guess you just have there's more breadth to it as far as like what is the power gamer doing that could be seen as a negative or disruptive behavior,
Mm-hmm.
where metagaming is almost always seen as a negative behavior,
Mm-hmm.
which I can also argue against that, like
Yeah,
as
same.
a blanket statement, right? Like there's always going to be some level of metagaming. We are people sitting at a table playing a game, so like there
Yeah.
is always going to be a bit of meta knowledge that is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Can't help
I
it.
well, yeah. So like there is always going to be some of this, and that's where these terms get messy. But I think overall, just to reiterate, power gaming is where your focus is on maximizing progress towards a specific goal.
All right, hell
Um,
yeah. And so I did want to talk a little bit on like what got you wanting to talk about this topic specifically. Because like, power gaming is a pretty general TTRPG thing. I think if you've been in the space, you've probably heard the term at least a few times. But what got you specifically thinking about it recently to talk
it,
about it here?
an episode of a show that I generally like because it's entertaining.
Mhm.
Well, and I did enjoy the episode for what it is, but I felt like there was a lot of room that was unexplored in it. But it was like a 5-minute show, so
Mhm.
it all started with an episode of Contested Role, which is a show that it like follows like Dimension 20. Like they
Oh.
film it as almost like an after show type of thing. At least that's the impression I get. I don't think that they specially pull these guests to go on to Contested Role, and it's basically like a debate about a given topic. I
Fun.
like the show. I like debate. I like Brendan Lee Mulligan, who is like the host of the show.
Mhm.
Fantastic DM. But this particular episode on power gaming was it was a terrible debate, which is fine because it's a joke show.
Mhm.
Um, but the the discussion seemed to focus upon making characters that were viable versus making characters that are not very viable or that are underpowered. And
Mhm.
I think that there is a difference between making a viable character that follows the rules of the game and what most people are referring to when they talk about power gaming.
Mhm.
Like I think that there is kind of a difference between like maximizing the given rule set to power game and just making a character that isn't bad.
Yeah, making a character that just works in the game, like can actually function and do things, especially
Yeah,
in some mechanic heavy games. Because I know some people are like, I'll give my wizard a 6 in intelligence. It's like, okay, then you're not a wizard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Because like if you're making a character that isn't viable or that is super weak or underpowered or is just you're doing something for a joke where you just deliberately underpower one of your characters or break the build,
Mhm.
in the sense that it is actually unplayable, like that's very different than utilizing the rules that are in front of you to a degree for some sort of unrealistic advantage.
Mhm. And so,
And oh, go
uh,
ahead.
I, yeah, I'm curious on like some examples that you may have of like specific like a good character that just works in the game versus a power game character, maybe within like 5e, since most people do know that.
Yeah. So I think if somebody is just wanting to use the rules to their benefit versus power gaming, I think one of the things that you have to take into consideration is, of course, the table that you're playing at,
Hmm.
as well as what rule set is being provided to you. That I want to be very careful when I'm talking about power gaming, only because I don't want to sound like I'm talking about people who are deliberately cheating at the game,
Hmm.
because there are similar behaviors there as well.
Hmm.
But okay, here's my example. So if somebody, I'm going to draw a comparison. If somebody always rolls 20s or always rolls high because they're cheating their dice rolls, versus somebody who has built their character to such a maximized state that they always succeed on their ability checks, in both scenarios, the net result is that you have disrupted the game by making it impossible for you to fail.
Mm. This-
And
Ooh.
yeah, and I'm not saying that one is definitely worse, right?
Hmm.
Like if you're lying about your dice rolls, that is clearly worse, I think, like because you're being dishonest to everyone at the table,
Yeah.
because you're lying on a tabletop game. You're
Yeah, and
lying
like
at make believe. Like, come
you're
on.
using the dice for a reason. You're using it for
Yeah.
uncertainty. Like if we all wanted to just decide what happened, let's just play a storytelling game together, you know? And
Yeah,
it,
yeah, you can always RP without the tabletop game part.
mhm. Which is definitely an interesting topic that I've seen a lot of people talk about too, is like the idea of like fudging dice rolls, whether or not it's good or bad, even especially as a GM. Maybe that's a
It's
different topic
bad.
for a different game. Uh
I'm just like, it's bad.
yeah, it's
I feel particularly strongly on that, but that is a whole sideline conversation to go down.
oh,
Uh,
for sure.
for
That
sure.
no, that is interesting though, because as and people may not even realize too, like that they are kind of power gaming. Like it may just be like instinctual of like, hey, I want the big number. I want to succeed, especially in games where when you do fail, there isn't a lot of there like nothing else happens. Like
Hmm.
if you fail, it's just like, okay, that's the end. Versus like if you do succeed, you're able to do something. So I can get the idea of wanting to have really high stats and really high numbers, but kind of how you put it, it kind of makes it so that, you're always succeeding is not fun because failure
Yeah,
is
I
really fun.
well, failure is also part of the game, and I think
Hmm.
that it comes down to like really, if you're playing a game and there's zero chance of failure, you shouldn't be playing the game, right? Like you should do something else that is a space where you can't have those same types of failures,
Hmm.
right? Like that's sort of, if we didn't, as you said, if we aren't looking at the dice, then why do we have them, right? Like
Yeah.
but that being said, like the only reason that I draw this comparison is because what I'm talking about specifically is if there is somebody at your table who has built their character to be very, very optimized to such a degree that the challenges presented are trivial to them, then the natural, like, I guess the natural arms race that you've in it that you've triggered is that your game master now has to make the encounters more challenging in order to confront the build that you've made that otherwise couldn't be challenged.
Mm.
And the thing that is a problem with that as a designer of a game is that if one player is a power gamer at your table and they have a broken character or a character that is just extremely powerful, right? Like they've done their research, they've found some coffee lock exploit that they've decided that they're going to bring to your game.
They found a magic weapon on D&D wiki.
Exactly, like or they found the right magic item that synergizes with their build in such a way that they found some sort of a gap in the rules that makes it difficult to challenge them. Trying to challenge that player directly on that build is going to kill the other characters at your table first.
Yeah, because they're not as powerful. Like, even if they're like solid characters still, they can't contend with things that are going to be like way higher than what they can actually deal with.
Well, yeah, because it's like, oh, well, your one character managed to find an exploit to get a bunch of big numbers and advantages on their rolls in order to hit very high target ACs or something, right? Or pass some very difficult skill checks. It's like, that's great for them. But if everyone else at the table is like incapable of succeeding at similar levels of check, then as the power gamer, either the power gamer is bored at the table because they have nothing to do because they'll succeed at any challenge that's presented to them, or they're going to be challenged and everyone around them is struggling really hard. It's a very difficult thing to balance, and I think that is sort of the gripe that more people would have with power gaming and why it can be a disruptive behavior, is because you would have to, if everybody this is the thing, is like, if everybody at the table is power gaming, everybody hits similar thresholds for their level or for their skill points or whatever system you're using. Like, if everybody is at a similar level, then it's easier to run the game overall. That's even why we have like levels, right? Like in advancement, it's like it keeps things consistent.
It's almost like if you played a game where everyone was level 5 and one person was level 10. Like,
yeah, which I've done
unfair.
that. I've put a character at the table that was a higher level than the other characters, and I can tell you it isn't fun.
Yeah.
Like, not really. At least not with the way that most games are built. I should put an asterisk there, because there are plenty of systems out there, I'm sure, that have ways of dealing with those sorts of discrepancies, but those are built into the game.
Yeah.
When the game isn't really built to have that great of a discrepancy into it, there is no countermeasure in the design of the game for that. That is when power gaming can be an issue. Because I think that the mentality behind power gaming can vary a lot from one person to another. But I think that there is a mentality of winning the game that does drive some players who power game, that I've had experience with, to focus on their build rather than making a character that suits the game and the table.
Yeah, and it almost, like, the thing with power gaming too, especially, again, I do want to put a huge emphasis that it does depend on your group. If you are a party full of power gamers, you're probably going to do just fine. You guys are going to have a great time. But like, if you're in a group where everyone's playing normal characters or just like pretty standard characters, and then you power game, that, like, it kind of I feel like it even disrupts teamwork in a way, because you want to be the one, like, being able to solve everything. It disrupts being able to kind of work together with the party, because you do have that mentality of, I I'm this cool character, I can do all these things, so I'm going to solve all the problems and everyone else can just watch. And so it does
Well,
get a little bit like I win.
and from experience, I can say if you have somebody who's very into power gaming at your table, who very much wants to, like succeed on the challenge, that person is likely going to like over the shoulder game other players as well.
Mhm.
Because, well, if they built their character to be super high charisma, warlock, can do all of this stuff, or even a very high dex build, rogue, right? It's like, well, if they encounter a challenge that their particular build can't pass, they might, again, it comes down to the individual person, but I do see consistent behavior in this of like they might end up telling other people, hey, you should be the one to do this, you should do
Mhm.
this, because
Mhm.
that is how we're going to get past this check. I'm going to go tell the barbarian that he has to go do this in order to activate this, contraption. He has to go move this item because he has the strength score for it. And that is not inherently bad to tell other people, hey, you're more suited for this challenge. But
Especially if they're new players too, because you don't really know
especially if they're
how
new
the
players.
game works. Yeah, so it is helpful and it can be a good thing, but if I think the problem comes when the person expresses that they don't want that, if they don't like when that person does it, or if they can just do it in a way that's like,
Yeah.
hey,
I,
you
I,
have
I
fire magic and this is a troll and we know this already.
yeah,
There's
I
a
think
difference between being helpful versus over the shoulder gaming, like you were saying.
yeah, and again, context is super important for this sort of
Hmm.
thing. But I do think that this is where some people will say things like, "Oh, power gaming isn't an issue." It's like, well, if everybody at your table is super familiar with the rules, everybody at your table built optimized characters, and you're
Hmm.
all playing the game at a very high level, it probably doesn't matter to your table. It becomes disruptive when there's people trying to exploit the mechanics of the game, either through a specific build that they found online that leads to, way too many spell slots being generated due to some sort of a hole in the rules. They're trying to exploit a certain play style that their DM is unfamiliar with how to handle it.
Hmm.
Um, Another thing is you could take, what was it? There's a couple of spells that you can kind of hot box your enemies with in D&D 5e.
Oh goodness.
While if you use at its higher level games, so this isn't an issue for most tables, but once you get what is it, Force Cage, and if you have another character that can cast, I think it's Sickening Radiance from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, it gains levels of exhaustion. It inflicts levels of exhaustion rather than just damage.
Hmm.
And so you can kill basically any monster that can fit inside of your force cage in 6 turns. And
That's
they
insane.
can't really do much about it unless they are also some sort of magic user spellcaster that
Hmm.
has prepared for this exact scenario. That is and that is something that, like, if we're playing a video game and you find an exploit to the rules like that, it's like, well, there is winning a video game.
Hmm.
But if you have that strategy, right? Like where you found this very niche scenario where you can hotbox any singular large enemy, then your game master is going to have to design around that strategy.
Hmm.
And if you have and then you almost feel like that's adversarial, right? Like, why is my DM targeting my spellcasters by making every single enemy have dimension door? They can
Yeah.
all dimension door out of the force cage now. And it's like, well, they kind of, you've backed your GM into a corner
Hmm.
through game mechanics that are technically following the rules, but that are very much not in the spirit of the game. Because what if your GM force caged you into a hot box with Sickening Radiance, right? Like, it it isn't fair when you're trying to win the game that hard, to
Hmm.
the point that you've found a particular unintended reading of the rules, like that is again technically correct, that you can win a lot of very difficult encounters with.
Yeah, and I think even the difference there too is, using like finding out that works and over again versus finding out that works and just using it like let's say you get to the final boss of the entire campaign and this is something that works because you did it once before sessions and sessions and sessions ago, maybe you should try it again. Like cuz I think that learning techniques and learning cool spell combinations like that can be really fun and
Mhm.
gives your players obviously a good advantage if they are able to do it, have the slots for it and all of that. And I think that's a cool thing. And as a GM, I would encourage my players to do that, but to how you were saying, to just use that in every single encounter to basically, win it instantly. That is where a bit more of the problem does come up.
Yeah, because again, I to counterpoint myself on that given scenario, if my players are using a particular strategy in order to thwart encounters, it does put you in a position as a game master to reflect upon the way that you're designing your encounters. Why are your encounters one large size creature, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
why are these the sorts of encounters that you've been running, and are there more interesting things that you could do that would maybe challenge a spellcaster in that scenario, such as
Exactly.
there's additional enemies nearby, they don't put themselves in a position to be like they ambush the party, they
Mm-hmm.
get the drop on them first, they have a much bigger friend standing right behind you. Things like that can challenge that without feeling like you're directly targeting them. Um,
Yeah.
but to pull away the veneer on that, though, you are still doing it to challenge them, because as we talked about in like the other episode on like being the game master, is you are a puzzle maker. You are making puzzles to challenge people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're trying to challenge your players. That is what we're doing here with the
Yeah, that's the point of the
design.
game.
Exactly. So it's like you are directly challenging them, but it doesn't feel very good when you can see the man behind the curtain setting up the challenge specifically to counter the one thing that you maximized your character to do,
Yep. And then
right?
and like you said, it is a bit more it brings contention and it makes it feel like, you are both adversaries and not actually like you're
Yeah.
just playing the game, trying to
Yeah,
defeat bad
you're
guys and whatever.
collaborating.
Yeah.
Like you are supposed to collaborate with your game master. They are one of the players at the table as
Mhm.
well. They have a different role. But this is sort of where, like, in order to referee the game, you would have to talk to your player about that like spell combination, right? Like Force Cage plus Sickening Radiance. Hey, that particular spell combination doesn't really fit the spirit of the game. I know it's technically rules as written, but it is as disruptive as, you know, it is as disruptive as being able to one shot an encounter because of some other Rube Goldberg machine,
Yeah.
right? That you've constructed. And it can lead to some cool moments, but I do think that using something like that is what leads to your like it leads to people complaining about the design of the game, or saying that something is broken, or banning something from their table, which is something that I really, really try to not do.
Mhm.
But somebody who is power gaming, looking for every possible advantage that they can, is the most likely person to find those exploits and use them at the table.
Yeah.
Which, again, if they talked to you about it beforehand and you okayed it, that's different.
Mhm.
A lot of this sort of thing comes out when somebody just off the wall says, hey, I do this, you do this, and then this happens. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, you have this expected outcome, but that's not a very healthy way to play your game either, because you
Mhm.
have this outcome in your head. If it doesn't work, you're going to feel like the GM has cheated you because
Yeah.
you spent so much time working towards this very specific Rube Goldberg of events,
Exactly. Yeah,
right?
you then have those expectations and then like if it doesn't work as intended, you would maybe feel upset or salty or like just like you're not having fun then. And that is where, actually that is where the table does matter, the play style does matter, because yeah, a power gamer can be disruptive to a group, but the power gamer can also not be able to have the fun that they want to have because
Exactly.
they're
They
not in a
invest
actually
so
fits.
heavily into this.
Exactly. Like you want to have fun, and so I know that finding groups can be hard, and that's always going to be, I think, a struggle when it comes to the tabletop space because everyone wants to play games, but scheduling and stuff like that is always
Yeah,
difficult.
and
So,
play style also doesn't always match. Like
yep,
personalities don't
yep.
always mesh well. There's not really a perfect method to make it happen.
No, not at all. But at least being able to keep in mind what you enjoy and being able to kind of vet out the tables that you're going to play, like, hey, is this okay? And if they say that power gaming, they don't like that and they're like specifically banning things, probably not going to be a table that you're going to enjoy playing at anyway, because it's not going to be the way that you're going to have fun.
Yeah, because I think that there's another good example. So one of my players is very mechanically, let's call him mechanically inclined. Uh,
I
so
thought that's
you know
what you
he
were going to say.
so he reads the rules, he understands the rules very well, and he builds characters that are well optimized.
Mhm.
Um, and you can jokingly look at his characters and say all of his characters are completely broken, ha ha. But they really aren't. They're just strong, right? Like
Mhm.
they're just well made. They aren't broken. They aren't they I have never had the experience with this particular player of his build ruining anybody else's good time,
Mhm.
right? Including mine. Like it's never been an issue. It's just a well-made character that generally does high damage. They're generally built to maximize their success and minimize their faults, right? Like they are min-maxed characters, but I haven't experienced disruptive behavior with something that is designed to, exploit a rule or exploit a combination of multi-class in order to achieve something the game designers didn't intend,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, because there's nothing wrong with playing a character that just works really well.
Yeah.
I think that's I know that people call rogues broken all the time
Hmm.
because they tend to be, those high numbers, they can succeed at a lot of things. But like that's kind of what the rogue is built to do.
That is all they do.
Yeah, like that's the
I,
one thing they're good at. They're good at that high dex. They can avoid things and they can sneak and they can pickpocket.
and they give
And
extreme bonuses to everything that, again, if you were trying to make a character that never rolls low as your goal, like rogue is probably the best way to go.
Mhm.
Um, and you could also pair that with, I don't know, something in 5e like the lucky feat that just lets you re-roll dice forever.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, lucky.
but the thing is, in the way that in 5e, the way that the rogue is designed is that even if you play them with like as an arcane trickster, right? Like they have some wizardness about
Mhm.
them. They're still not equipped to handle every possible scenario because if you've maximized your dexterity, you probably lack strength. There are
Mhm.
scenarios where strength can be important.
Yeah.
They can be a spellcaster, but they're not going to be a particularly great one. They're not
Yeah,
going to be
not as strong as a
particularly
wizard
powerful.
either.
So if you need magic and magical utility to get through a challenge, you need to have friends.
Mhm.
And those gaps are what really creates, the dynamic of your party, and that's
Exactly.
really good. And it's part of the fun of games with complex rule systems is that, yeah, like everybody's filling their own niche.
Mhm. Which
Um,
then gives everyone a specific role in the party too.
yeah,
I feel like I'm fulfilling a need that we have when I'm playing a character. Let's say I'm playing a support character. Like, I'm
Yeah.
filling that need for support. I'm filling that need for someone who needs to be really evasive because sometimes you need that as well. Being able to sneak around, being able to have movement, stuff like that. All
Yeah.
very important things.
Well, and you can see in a lot of games that what I just said there about, oh, well, the rogue isn't particularly like a powerful spellcaster. There is somebody out there who will have made a build of a rogue that multi-classes them with wizard or something instead, right? Or that has managed to make a rogue that is an extremely high spellcaster, extremely high level spellcaster that has like some dips in rogue enough to get all the rogue abilities from them, and has
Mhm.
made a character that they have designed to fill every utility niche, right? Like
Mhm.
they are the ultimate utility belt. Um, and you'll find a lot of builds like that involve things like multi-classing, because multi-classing in 5e is not very well designed.
No.
Um, it is an optional rule, and that's why, is because it was never very well optimized against power gaming, against people finding exploitative like multi-classing scenarios. It's why so many things that you could find on YouTube of like, oh, look at this, the most broken build in D&D part 9, right? Like, is going to involve multi-classing
Yeah, because it's just
because
insane.
because you end up with a lot of unintended consequences, and your
Mhm.
players have a lot more time to figure out exploits than your designers do.
Exactly.
And
And even you do. That's the thing as well.
yeah,
Like there can be a lot of pressure put on the GM to keep an eye on all of the things like preventing power gaming and preventing overpowered things within the game. But like, it makes sense, but at the same time, the GM only has so much time,
hmm,
has only so much energy to put towards keeping an eye on every little thing that when you then exploit it, it also sucks because, yeah, maybe they're trying to keep an eye, but they missed one thing, or they didn't
hmm,
realize that combination was going to work that way. And then it, again, just gets a bit into that competitive relationship where you're trying
yeah.
to outmaster each other because you want to be able to play a certain way and it's the opposite way of the other person.
Yeah, I think another good example, and this is another thing that has like shifted. This is more of a just shift in tone for the tabletop RPG space in general.
Hmm.
Is that there's a lot more folks that play games that are more narratively focused than are focused on finishing the module.
Yep.
Because I think power gaming is a different way to play the game. That, again, if everybody at your table is power gaming and you guys are like, we are going to play Storm King's Thunder and we're gonna finish this book in a year,
Do
right?
it.
Like you can do that, and that's awesome, and that will probably require that you use the rules of the game to gain an unfair or unrealistic advantage
Yep.
in any other game, right? Because you're trying to do things with the foreknowledge that, one, that you're playing that particular module, right? Like, I'm not saying you've read the module ahead of time, because that's a whole different issue, but just that you have an awareness. I'm going to be fighting giants,
Yeah.
right? So you pick things that are going to be good against giants.
Hmm.
You pick things that are going to be good in a host of scenarios that you expect from that adventure.
Yep.
And you and your buddies are all getting together and deciding, we are going to complete this module by all means necessary. We're going to optimize our party as much as possible to
Hmm.
cover every given scenario. And we're going to, get as much experience as we can. We'll take on every fight and scenario we can, because that's how we're going to level up. Like the phrase of, hey, we need to go kill X number of things. That way we can level up before the next chapter. Or like if you're using XP leveling, that is, if you're
Hmm.
not using chapter leveling. Um, but that is an attitude that works at a table that is doing that specific thing, that's
Yep.
playing that game. Where I think most people that I talk to or that I play with don't play their tabletop game as like similar to how they would play a video game.
Yeah.
And again, in a video game, if you find an exploit in order to cheese your way through some sort of encounter or level, right? You're like, I really hate this level, and I've found a way to exploit the game in order to just cheese it really fast and skip it. Like, that's an attitude that if somebody took that attitude with a boss monster in one of my games, that would suck a lot of the fun out of the narrative for me, that they're like, oh, I know how to deal with the Tarrasque.
Yeah.
All that I need to do is fly up above it and spam Sacred Flame a million times. Or whatever other I don't know if that would specifically work. I don't think the Tarrasque has a health regen. Maybe it does. Or maybe you would have to do like a, what is it, like a chill touch, so it can't regain hit points, and you just spam that in infinitely. And it's like, well, they don't have any way of countering a flying enemy, so I'll just stay 60 feet away from it and just spam this on it until it dies. And it's like, well, that is technically a thing that you can do. It does it. One, that encounter being set up in that fashion is probably not a very well designed encounter, to be fair. but coming into it with that energy of like, oh yeah, I have found a way to quote unquote break the game, right? Like I've come here to win D&D.
Yep.
And I have found that the most optimal way to kill this particular monster is to do this thing that I know that it can't respond to, and win. And
Yep.
Like, well,
which is truly such a video game mindset, which again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that.
Yeah, of course. Again, it's like it's sort of just the difference of like, if you're playing your game that way, that isn't the way that I, Zakariah, want to play my game. Hopefully, I've made the encounters engaging in such a way that you want to engage with them. Hopefully, I've made them engaging in a way that you want to engage with them as a character in a story.
Yep.
But imagine you've set up this huge narrative thing where it's like, oh, the monster's dangling your character's sister over a pit of lava, and your player is like, yeah, but like, I have Repelling Blast on Eldritch Blast, so the fastest way to win this encounter is to just cast it on the villain and knock them into the lava pit, because lavas do 60-10 of damage every single turn, and that's going to be enough to, it'll have difficult terrain. It won't be able to it won't be able to get itself back out. I know that this enemy can't fly.
Yeah.
So the thing that I need to do is just say, fuck it to my sister or whatever. Like, that doesn't matter. I'm just going to knock this villain into the pit. Right? like you would win the game, but narratively that would annoy me.
Yeah, and that just isn't as fun too, because again, it is like all about these challenges. It's the challenge of this like really intense battle at a freaking lava pit and all of that. Like there's like all of this flair around it. And it's almost kind of ignoring that and just going into, I need to kill this enemy, which again, isn't necessarily bad. But if, and like, I know we keep saying it throughout this entire episode here, but like, it is so important on that playstyle, because if your GM really, really likes building up narrative encounters, ones that have multiple different obstacles and things for you to use, and terrain that may cause issues for you or may have advantages for you and all of that, and then all you do is like instantly knock it out just because you want to get the fight over, kind of sucks. Like that just feels bad, especially because I know one of my friends that I play with had a group that she ran for that were, I don't know if they're exactly power gamers, but from a lot of the descriptions, it sounded like they were, because they would just completely steamroll every single encounter, get it done as quickly as possible, and then kind of make fun of my friend who's GMing, like, why didn't you make it harder? And it's like, that's where it gets disruptive and is a bad thing.
Well, yeah, because I mean, at that point, it's like, well, somebody spent however many hours trying to get this game ready for you to have fun, and hopefully you had fun killing it, but if you're complaining or I guess goading the DM, it's like they're a person who set up this encounter for you to win, first of all. So
Yeah.
you winning the encounter is not a surprise. Again, we talked about that more in like the puzzle making video, but it's like you want your players to have at least for me personally, I think of it as like a 60-40 rule. I want 60% chance of success every time.
Yeah.
Right? Like I honestly, you could even crank that up, maybe like 70%. 70%
I want
chance
them
of
to
success.
win.
Yeah, I want them to win. It's like 70% chance of success, 30% chance of failure. The failure has to be real. There has to be real consequences. Otherwise, again, why are we doing this?
Yep.
However, I do want you to win. So you winning and gloating about it isn't really a flex. That was the intention, right?
Yeah, I
Like,
wasn't trying to outright kill you and then just like start you off with new characters. No, it was to win. Because again, we're playing this game to have fun.
yeah,
You
and to
having fun means winning encounters. And me
yeah.
having fun is building encounters that challenge you enough to think, but you still win because I am your cheerleader. I want you to win.
Yeah, because again, it's like the puzzle maker makes this game in your favor. The part of your GMing role as the rules arbiter is unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, that is who is present at the table running the game, is the person trying to make sure everything is quote unquote fair, right? For your players as well as for your monsters or your traps or whatever challenge. But the game has been like weighted on one side, like heavily by the puzzle making part of the GM role. Like the finger is on the scale before the start, and then at the table as the referee, you have to be there stoically, not necessarily, but you have to be there basically stoically handling the rules of the given scenario that you handed yourself.
Yep.
Or that a module gave to you if you read modules and use encounters straight out of the book. But you're ruling on that, but the game is weighted on your player's side already. That being said, if there are people that are saying that they don't feel particularly challenged, that can be an opportunity for the GM to reflect on what sort of game and encounters their players are looking for.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And you can improve on encounter design. You can improve on the exact nature of the scenario, like larger than the single encounter, like the larger scenario of, well, are we just wandering through an overland forest? Maybe that's not the most challenging location. Or you could look into other things like, oh, along the way there's razor vine in these woods, so they have to navigate that. You have to spend hours chopping through thorns in order to get to this location. You either travel quickly and you take damage or roll against exhaustion, or you cast spells in order to avoid these trials. That way, once you get to the encounters, you're already fatigued and damaged and running low on supplies, and then you throw like 4 more encounters at them in a row. Like,
Yeah,
whatever.
using non-combat like complications and encounters is always, I think, a fantastic idea whenever you like approach creating an encounter. Even with my combats, I've had several times where they're able to complete it by not like they don't have to beat the enemies. They just could solve this puzzle or do something else that would have helped, you finished the combat, you finished the encounter because you did the objective. You didn't have to kill everything. Like
it's like,
I
oh,
always
there's
love encounters like
there's a
that.
giant power orb in the center of the arena. Maybe if you attack the power orb, then the electro golem will turn off or whatever.
Exactly. Like it's interesting things like that. And then, that's where it's fun as like a group where it's like, okay, some people need to fend off this like electro golem, and either one person or several people need to start attacking this power orb in the middle. Then like just all of the different moving parts going on at the same time and figuring out where you're going. That's a blast. Please.
Mhm.
I want that.
Yeah, and
Um,
and there and definitely, like, if your players aren't feeling engaged, that isn't inherently, like, a sign that they are power gaming.
mhm.
However, what I will address in the scenario that you told me about your friend is that, at least from the vibe that I'm getting from it, from your retelling, is that it feels like the players feel like they're beating the game.
Yeah.
And I think that that is an attitude that is in and of itself combative, because
Mhm.
if you feel like winning the encounter means that you're beating the GM, that you're winning the game, that is an attitude that is sort of counterproductive to the tabletop RPG scene as a whole.
Yes.
Because, as we said, of course you won. It
Mhm.
was designed that way. Like like this is a collaborative experience. We're using dice in order. You're all like TTRPG people are degenerate gamblers, but we don't have money. So we risk our characters, right? Like, that's the
Exactly.
game. But
We risk our characters and our emotions if they die.
exactly. It's like, why do monetary damage when I can do permanent emotional damage?
Exactly. It's more fun that way, right?
Yeah, yeah. But it is something that we are doing collaboratively. And if you want a greater challenge, that's something to talk to your GM about,
Mhm.
because like, let's say you're bored. You're like, the combats are too simple. I walk up, I whack with a sword a couple times. It's not working for me. That's something to talk to your GM about, not just, if what you're looking for is a challenge, that's a whole other issue
Yep.
from, like, oh, I'm so good at the game that I've managed to beat it. And it's like,
Mhm.
you can be good at the game, and that can assist you for more complicated scenarios, right? Like, a more experienced GM might ask more of you as a player in order to solve their more complex puzzles that they've, created through experience. They have so much experience doing this that making complicated, engaging puzzles is easier for them. Um, but that is still not winning the game. You win
Yeah.
the game when everybody had fun, and you can talk about the awesome memories that you've created afterwards. And somebody bragging about how good at the game they are isn't an awesome memory for anyone.
Yeah, because then it's like there's not anything inherently wrong about it, but it just doesn't feel fun. Like it's not fun to just hear how good at the game you are. No,
I,
it's
I
it's more fun to be like, hey, we just defeated this red dragon all together, and you did this awesome thing, and I did this, and blah 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 blah.
Well, because there was something that I did want to address,
Yeah, absolutely.
which was that these sort of issues.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode Midpoint. I hope you are all doing well, and if you're enjoying this episode of the RPG Goblin, that you make sure to follow the RPG Goblin wherever you listen to your podcasts and give it a good review. Now, for today's Midpoint, I want to say, hey, it is 2024 now. This is the very first episode that is releasing in the new year, and it is very exciting. And I have so many things planned for this year that I can't wait for. But one thing that I wanted to mention is at the end of 2023, I hosted a TTRPG party in my Discord server, and it went amazing. And during that party, one of the things that happened is that I announced something, and that is, I have a Patreon now! So I created the Patreon because I really want ways that people can support the show and also gain more access to kind of behind the scenes type content and special things like having your name shouted out at the end of episodes and also being able to see some behind the scenes conversations with my guests, which I have a lot of them that I'm really excited to share in the Patreon. And so along with that, I also really want to host more of these TTRPG parties, and that is one of the things that the lowest tier, the $5 tier of the Patreon, will get. You get access to special roles within the RPG Goblin Discord that will give you access to any events or anything that we do. And it will also give you access to live TTRPG parties that we are going to be having every single month. Now, I still have to put together the schedule for the TTRPG party for this month, but I'm very excited to do more of these and for more people to join the Patreon and all of that. So if you want to support the RPG Goblin, you like the show and you like what I'm doing here, and you want to see me produce more TTRPG content especially, make sure to go check out the Patreon and support if you can. I appreciate any kind of support, even if you become a member for free and just follow along on what's happening. That would be more than enough, and I would appreciate it so much.
Well, because there was something that I did want to address.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was that these sort of issues lend themselves more to complicated systems, like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder. More rules heavy systems seem to have more issues with power gaming than rules light systems. In my experience, I think that the player base of rules light systems tend to be more on the side of like there's more creative freedom in a rules light system because there aren't rules for everything, and it kind of forces you to engage with your game master and accept their role as the referee and rules arbiter. Where a rules like heavy system, a more crunchy system, puts more responsibility on you as the player to quote unquote like be good at the game,
because it's more complicated.
Well, and to that effect, like if you're power gaming, right, like which is the subject of the day, if you're power gaming, the way that you are doing it is by taking the rules that are in front of you and finding ways of using the rules of the game to succeed at something else that is according to the rules of the game. And I think that there are so many scenarios in a tabletop RPG that can't be solved or can't reasonably be solved or realistically be solved through game mechanics, but could be solved through the basic game loop of I ask to do something, the GM sets a DC, you roll a D20. If you roll high, you get to do it. And I think that is sort of why there's this disconnect, because in a video game, all that you have are the rules that are built into the video game.
Yeah.
And on a tabletop game, you have infinite rules. The rules are they go on forever. They're because there's so many stipulations that you can't have a rule book with every possible thing in it, right? Like you can't have every single scenario covered. Just look at the nonsense. If you want to go down a rabbit hole of nonsense, look up grappling rules throughout the years.
Oh, I'm scared.
Like 3rd edition grappling is like 4 pages long.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
Look it up. Like it's long. I don't know if it was like 3 or 4 pages, but it's way too long. And so nobody did it. But but now if you look at 5e grappling rules, they are so streamlined that they almost don't make sense. Like when somebody says I grapple a target, what are they saying that they're doing? Right? Like what are you physically doing when you're grappling someone is something that the game itself doesn't really have rules for. So grappling builds end up living in this weird abstract area where they have like one free hand, and that means that they can grapple it while they attack it. And it's like, well, but what are you like? How are you doing that with your longsword? Like, how physically are you standing that this is possible?
And even if you're really strong, like giving yourself just one hand to grapple would give you a disadvantage, even if it unless the person's like really small or like much weaker than you.
Yeah, and even then, because grappling is like such an effective thing in like medieval like martial combat. Like literally, if you have a chain glove and you just walk up and grab the other dude's sword, like what are they gonna do? So like it's very effective, and I think one of the problems is that it's almost too effective, right?
Yeah.
And it's so effective that it kind of breaks down the abstraction to such a degree that it feels more like a video game. But like what if your player wants to cover the enemy wizard's mouth? Like there's no rule in grappling for how to do that.
Yeah.
There can't be. There can't be.
How
That is
dare they not
one.
include the option to cover someone's mouth? This is a
Yeah,
terribly
well, what if
designed
the
game.
creature has two mouths? You don't know. Like, there's so many possibilities. What if the creature doesn't have a humanoid body? Right? Like, how would you write grappling rules for something that is more like a dog? You know, it doesn't have hands. You can't like take it like, you know, any rule that has to do with, oh, this is something in its hands wouldn't be valid. But also, like, can you like, if something has the mouth the size of a crocodile, can you hold it shut with one free hand? Maybe.
Yeah, I think it would just be much better to just like both arms surround the mouth, like keep it closed.
And that sort of thing is impossible to write detailed enough rules about that they cover every possible scenario.
Yep.
But that is something that you can do in a tabletop game that you can't do in a video game. A video game has to live by certain rules that were programmed in. And so when you are power gaming and you're focusing so much on the rules of the game and how to use the rules of the game, it can end up taking away from the TTRPG experience because you are missing so many out of rule possibilities.
Yep.
But this is, again, kind of like the dynamic between you and your DM. If you're trying to create, or you have fostered unintentionally, an adversarial relationship between you and your GM, then you find yourself in an unwinnable battle where your GM won't grant you any leniency on the things that we can't write rules about because they're worried that that precedent will be used by the power gamer in order to exploit other rules, right? It puts the GM in this paralyzing position.
Yeah, as soon as you say yes to something.
Yeah, it's like, well, I said that you could do this while you were grappling. Ah, yes. Well, if I can do that, then how about this? You know, what about this? What about this thing? And it's like, if it's in the spirit of the game and it seems like everybody's on board with it, absolutely you can do that. But it does become very, very messy when somebody who is so invested in the rules of the game that every tool that you give them becomes a way for them to exploit the rules of the game. And again, like a billion times in this conversation, it's like it does depend upon your table and upon what everybody can agree on. And if everybody at your table is cool with what is happening at your table, that's fine. But these are, I think, common pitfalls that people have, is that, yeah, it's like this, we've created this environment where this person is using the rules to win the game. And that is maybe not the attitude that you want them to have at your table, because you want to have something that's more organic or that's more narratively focused, or something that is more, you know, just focused on having fun. Yeah. Rather than, you know, having to put together this weird Rube Goldberg machine of doom that they've put together through some combination of the rules. I will say that there is also like a big distinction between somebody who's power gaming and somebody who is trying to break the rules or trying to like find an uncharitable like reading of the rules that makes their build work, right?
Yeah,
where
it's
maybe
not like you're trying to cheat or anything, because you are like, you are wanting to use the rules and how they are written. It's just a way in your advantage, which again isn't a bad thing, because they're there for a reason. The rules are laid out for a reason, and if you want to follow them like that and use them to your advantage, go right ahead. But yeah, then there's cheating, which isn't as nice.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm not talking about that. It just, I think, again, power gaming, finds itself in this weird position where designing an adventure around the intentions of someone who will optimize the fun out of the game leads to your game becoming worse.
Mm-hmm.
Like having to build the game around somebody who's like, oh, no matter what I throw at them, they're going to find a way to win. Like not a way to have fun. They're going to find a way to win.
Yeah, find a way to be able to get out of this trap that you gave them or instantly beat the monster. Which again, isn't necessarily a bad thing if that's what you want to do. And I think that's where a lot of this comes down to just like communication, like as a group and between like the players and the GM on expectations for the game, your different play styles, and what you actually want to achieve here.
Yeah, I think that along those lines, it's kind of like anytime that somebody asks you for a skill check, right? When they ask you for a skill check rather than for a specific thing that they want to do, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I often throw that back at my players as what is it that you want to do? Like, what is it that you want to find out? What are you trying to do is such an important thing to discuss with your GM.
Yep.
Because, hey, I want to use the fact that, you know, that lava does a ton of damage in order to beat this enemy. And it's like, cool, I can alley-oop you. I can set you up for that scenario if we're all on the same page. Because, again, I want you to succeed. I'm your partner in this adventure. I'm not your adversary. But what I am going to do is I'm going to try to set it up in a way that makes sense for my game and doesn't step on the fun of other people at the table as well. So I think that we probably like trod this round well enough because overall I would say min-maxers, power gamers, whatever, but like min-maxers aren't problem players, but most problem players are also min-maxers. Is probably a good way to summarize.
I would say this. I have definitely seen this come up a few times where there have also been problem players that do intentionally make bad characters as well, like we kind of talked about earlier in this episode, where it's like, I'm literally going to make a build that doesn't mechanically work in the game, where I end up fucking over the rest of my party because of it. And I almost feel like it's kind of in the same area as power gaming, but like on the opposite end. Like, I'm not gonna make a character that works.
To like the opposite of power gaming, where someone's they're making a character specifically to be bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the opposite of power gaming, making a character that mechanically is bad and doesn't where basically you can't do anything and you leave most of the stuff up to everyone else in the party and almost like intentionally cause issues because you're not able to succeed in what you're doing. And I don't think this is as common, but I've definitely seen it pop up quite a few times where someone will intentionally make a bad character because it's like a goof or funny.
No, that is definitely, I think, as bad of an issue as power gaming, if not worse, because you end up with a similar problem where everybody at your table they're not there for the same game.
Yep.
Right? Like, you're not playing the same game, you're being weighted down by this one person. Maybe you could have used an extra person at your table who genuinely wanted to play the game right, but this person doesn't want to be collaborative with their party. And I think that is what that comes down to, is like you aren't collaborating with your GM because you're making it difficult to build encounters around the fact that you are you're a paperweight.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially if you also are someone who just start conflicts too. Like if you go out to be like, all right, I'm going to provoke this person and like get yourself into trouble on things. It's like, oh man, this is so stressful. Why are you doing this?
I think that almost falls under that given scenario almost falls under like they're poking at the GM
hmm
of like daring you to kill them.
Yeah.
Which is something that I have had issues with players who don't like character death. I
hmm
haven't had the exact scenario, fortunately, of somebody trying to, provoke me into killing their character. But that's what that sounds like to me. It sounds like somebody has built a character that is designed to die, and they're kind of daring you to kill them. Like, what are
Yeah.
you going to do? Are you going to ruin my fun by killing my character? And it's like, well, I
No, I
mean,
don't want to,
it's like,
but
no, I don't want to, but you should. Like in
hmm
that scenario, it's like if they have built a character that is unable to survive and is causing other problems, like that sounds like an out of game problem firsthand. Like
yeah, for
probably
sure.
should be a
Again, like
conversation outside. But
communication, like talk about it, like, hey, hold on,
yeah,
there
but
might be something wrong here.
if their goal is that, oh no, I made a character that was really unoptimized. I wanted to see how long they could live. This character is expendable to me.
hmm
That's fine. That's
Yeah.
awesome, honestly. Like if somebody came
Yeah.
up to me and they were like, I fully intend this character to kick the bucket and it's going to be very dramatic.
hmm I
But
know.
I
I think I
want them
talked
to
to
die.
Curtis, who had. I talked to Curtis, and I think he mentioned something like his. He played a monk where his dump stat was Constitution on purpose, and
Hmm.
it's like, I would be fine if he died, but like that was like a personal choice. I just wanted to see what would happen. And this is not to say like there's anything bad with having flaws with characters and having characters be bad at things, because I think that's fantastic. Go for it. It's just it probably shouldn't be like the core thing they should be good at.
I mean, you know what really is kind of neat to me is if you very much do have if you're that sort of person who likes building characters, like you build characters in your spare time, you have a lot of fun with it. One thing
Mhm.
that I would challenge people to do rather than try to optimize their game is try to optimize their play style with a particular character, because
Ooh.
kind of what you were saying there is like, oh, I dumped con. Like, right?
Yeah.
I dumped Constitution. My character is super brittle. Um, if you're doing that and you manage to live, I think that is a much bigger flex than actually being a more powerful character. Is I took this objectively like kind of bad decision and I made it work anyway because I could use other things in my
Mhm.
toolkit and other things in my knowledge as a tabletop game player in order to not die,
Yeah.
right? Like
Not
it's
perish
like
instantly.
honestly, anybody who dumps their armor class, I have so much respect for as well.
Mhm.
And I've had players that have like it's become an ongoing joke of high AC is for nerds. Because if you manage to maximize your build to like up your armor class to like 25, like that's fine, I guess. You're enjoying combat where everyone misses everything all the time. The
Mhm.
tension there, I can feel it now. But but I think it is even more impressive to be like my armor class is 11
Yeah.
and
Commando.
I am not going to die because I'm so aware of the way that the game works. I have
No, I
such a
love
mastery of the mechanics that I'm like, I will never put myself in a position to get wailed on because
that. Mhm.
I have Misty Step. I can move myself onto high ground 30 feet away, and then I can, I don't know, cast Expeditious Retreat and move far enough away that I can just pelt things with fire bolts from here,
Yeah,
right?
I
Like
love that.
I can weasel my way out of any scenario. Like if you're a wizard, it's especially like at least to me pretty like clear how you could do this because there's so many ways to stall through like if you're doing what is it, mirror image, you can multiply
Mhm.
yourself, make it harder to hit. You could cast blink, make yourself harder to hit, more
I'm out of here.
enigmatic. Yeah, you could cast invisibility and move away, right? Like there's a lot of things that you can do to be like, yeah, I built this character that is, super unoptimized, but I promise you all that won't be a problem,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly. Like there's cool things when you make an unoptimized build as long as it's intentional that it's going to be fun for you and you have a plan with it. Like I think that's
yeah,
the best part and that's a cool thing as well as I feel like if I was a player in a group or even a GM, if someone came to me with a really strange build and like, okay, just believe me on this. And I'm like, all right. And they make it work. Hell yeah. No, I love that. Like, and I love how you phrased it as well. Like, make a character optimized to your play style versus make it optimized to what, you know, I guess the
big
min max
number.
would be. Yeah,
It's sort of
exactly.
like
Instead of the big number.
like I think big number big number politics in tabletop games is kind of
Number politics.
toxic. It's like, well, because it's like, oh, how do you beat your enemy? It's like, well, bigger number. It's why I'm not
Mhm.
a huge fan of systems getting to the big number territory where it's like, oh, I do 105 damage, and then I, reduce they reduce that by 71 or whatever.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not super into the huge numbers because I don't think that it actually it doesn't add tension. It just makes all of the numbers bigger.
Yeah.
Because when
And if
your
people
numbers
like
get
that,
bigger, the
then
enemy numbers get bigger. Like that's what happens. So the numbers being bigger just kind of provokes bigger numbers on the opposing side of
Mhm.
the combat.
Yeah, and that's actually it's not like it's not even like a huge change, but that's why like roll under D20 systems kind of make me happy or any system that's roll under because it almost
Mm.
makes you think of numbers differently. Like it's not the big
Yeah.
number. The big number's bad. The big number's
Well,
going to kill
also,
you.
yeah, because I think the Conan RPG does that as well as what is it? Isn't it the white box has it basically any check that you need to do in white box, you have to roll below your ability score
Oh, it's
in order to
possible.
succeed. I think that it's the white box that does that. It might be a different one of the
Mhm.
many OSR games out there. But yeah, I think that the idea of like, oh, I can maximize this character to do the biggest numbers is like you're almost cheating yourself out of one of the bigger joys of the tabletop RPG space, which is the amount of creativity and different ways that you can interact with given scenarios.
Mhm.
Um, so I would personally love to see more of that as far as if you're going to power a game, like can you find ways to keep the game fun and entertaining for yourself without taking away anybody else's fun by making your character so good that you accelerate the big number arms race.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it
I
it is a fairly nuanced topic, and I think it's important to lean on the fact that like it really isn't power gaming as most people talk about it unless you are creating some sort of unfair advantage for yourself,
Mhm.
because then you're just good at the game. If
Yeah.
it doesn't become if it doesn't become an issue, then you're probably not doing it. Right?
Mhm.
Like you're not doing it's not a problem if everyone's doing it. But it's not a
Yeah.
problem if it's not a problem unless it's becoming disruptive, but the behavior of winning the game or building your characters to win the game or to accelerate bigger numbers better can lead you down a rabbit hole where you are causing the other people at the table, whether that's the GM alone or the GM and the other players, to have a worse experience. So
Yeah.
I
So I
don't
think
think
it's
I
oh,
don't think any of that got brought up in that. Well, I know it didn't because I watched it yesterday to review. That they didn't bring up any of that as like a point in
Mhm.
that one video that I watched that kind of spurred my entire like thought process in this direction. Is like they were all basically just talking about power gaming like that implies that you're just using the rules to your benefit. And it's like,
Mhm.
yes, that is the case, but that isn't entirely what most people mean when they're talking about it as an issue.
Exactly.
Yeah, like we
And that's
wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't a problem for anyone ever.
exactly. And that's where I also do appreciate you defining like what you meant by power gaming too at the beginning. This is
Yeah.
exactly what we're going to be talking about, and also being clear. It is up to the groups and the play styles, and as long as people are having fun, that is the most important thing. If you are power gaming, having fun, great for you, good for you, awesome time.
Yeah.
But no, I think this has been fantastic, and I think almost like in my head, kind of the moral of the story: just talk with your group, just
Yeah,
communicate. Like,
honestly, isn't that like 90% of every like forum post on
yeah.
Reddit that complains about, oh, my player's this, my GM that? It's like,
Mhm.
just if y'all just talked to each other about what was the problem, what was the issue at hand, this wouldn't be an issue. Like, it's straight
Yeah,
up just communication because it's a collaborative game.
exactly.
Everybody has to work together to tell the stories that we tell and play the game that we're playing, because there are so many possibilities that
Mhm.
maybe if your expectations don't align, then you're going to that is where you're going to create this friction
Mhm.
between players, one player versus another player, or player versus their GM, or any combination thereof.
Yep.
Is when anybody has an expectation of what is happening that doesn't match everybody else's expectations of what is happening.
Exactly. And so just communicate with your group, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like,
Thank you and good night. No.
I'm begging you. No, but yeah, I think though that's probably the end here. Like, I think we covered a lot. If you have things to add to the conversation, maybe I'll make a post on Twitter, or you can comment on stuff on Twitter. Do that. That'd be cool. And also, I guess this could be a cool way to promote the fact that I have a Discord now for the RPG Goblin. I've had one for a while, but now it's open to the public. So if you want to talk about power gaming with me or with Zakariah or any of the other cool people that we have in the Discord, that's going to be open, and you can find that in the description of this
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah, at me.
Yeah, do it. Zakariah is always prepared to talk about
Yeah.
TTRPGs.
Yeah, no, I love it.
But yeah, I think we are going to end this here. But before we do, one final time, Zakariah, where can people find you and your awesome content?
On DMsGuild, so that's DMsGuild.com. And if you go into the search bar and you look up Zakariah, Zakariah, and you search that, all of the results that come up are things that are authored by me, and you can just scroll through and download all of them. If any of them have a like suggested pay amount on them, you can just fill that in with 0. There is not a single thing that I put up there that is that you can't download for free. Like, they are all available for free. So go ahead and get you some content.
Exactly. Fun new content to add to your games, or even interpret and bring into other games, which is
Mm-hmm.
really, really fun. But yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And thank you again, Zakariah, for coming on and talking with me. Again, the link for Zakariah's DM's Guild will be in the description of this episode, so you can check it out down there. But yeah, we are going to wrap it up. Go make sure to check out the Discord. Come join and hang out with us, and check out Zakariah. And yeah, play more games and have a good time? Question mark. But yeah, this is the end.
Huge thank you to all of the Patreon supporters and Kyle Adderson for being our $20 patron who gets their name shouted out at the end. Thank you!